One of the key moments in the Dance of the Dragons is when Team Black recruit 4 so-called Dragonseeds to ride their riderless dragons. But what are Dragonseeds? How Targaryen do they have to be? And what did we learn about dragon bonding from it all? Let's take a look. Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to In Deep Geek. Here we dive deep into George R.R. Martin's world of ice and fire, as well as The Lord of the Rings and The Witcher. If you're new here, welcome. This video was co-produced with the wonderful History of Westeros. Please do check out their excellent podcast and YouTube channel. There are links in the description. Oh, and this is your usual House of the Dragon spoiler alert. I'll just be talking about what happens in the books here, but obviously the show will probably stick reasonably closely to that, so if you want to avoid that, proceed with caution. Who can ride or bond with a dragon, and why, is a cause of much debate in A Song of Ice and Fire circles. Things were pretty straightforward when old Valyria ruled much of the known world. The freehold were ruled by 40 families of dragon riders. Only these houses rode dragons and no one else did. We don't know all the details of how this worked, but we do know that sorcery was used to form a closer bond with dragonkind. And incest seems to be a part of what enabled the dragon-riding families to pass this bond to successive generations while limiting access to outsiders. This is the origin of the term, or at least the idea behind the concept, of blood of the dragon. Of course, with the doom of Valyria, all of these bloodlines were destroyed except one, House Targaryen, who had relocated to Dragonstone after Daenerys the Dreamer foresaw the disaster. Knowledge of the magic behind dragon bonding seems to have also been lost, but the Targaryens continue to marry within their own family with little exception over the centuries that followed to maintain the bond that they had, and thus keep their dragons to themselves. They may not have known how to redo that original magic, but they could try to preserve what was already there and prevent its dilution by marrying non-Valyrians. And the result seems broadly what they were hoping for. Interestingly, we do not have a single example of a Targaryen coming to harm while trying to claim an unclaimed dragon, at least not from the dragon itself. To be clear, many dragons have killed many Targaryens in war or execution or otherwise, but no riderless dragon has slain or even injured a Targaryen who was trying to claim them. Strong evidence that the blood of the dragon is at least a significant advantage in claiming a dragon. But what happens when a Targaryen has a child with a partner who does not have the blood of the dragon? That child is a Dragonseed, which means that they have the blood of the dragon in their recent lineage, and thus, presumably, the potential to ride a dragon. It's not clear when the term Dragonseed began to appear, but it predated old King Jaehaerys, and may have existed since House Targaryen came to Dragonstone, or even earlier, back into old Valyria. Whatever it's called, we know that quite a few Targaryens had children amongst the common folk of Dragonstone and elsewhere on occasion. The disturbing practice of First Night, where a ruling lord could forcibly take any woman on her wedding night before her husband, was abolished, but only in the time of the old king. Thus there were still many descendants of that era to be found. Often they were celebrated by the lords of Dragonstone and honoured with gold and gifts, even land. Thus, the blood of the dragon could pass down to new children through these various offspring, as many of them would have naturally gone on to have families of their own. The Targaryens and their dragons lived on Dragonstone for 100 years before Aegon the Conqueror and his sister queens forged the Iron Throne, and another 130 years after that came the Dance of the Dragons. That's 230 years of potential Dragonseeds, more or less. Some members of these families would be easy to spot if they inherited the distinctive Targaryen purple eyes and silver hair, though a person's colouring is not itself proof of Targaryen heritage. Many other families with Valyrian but non-dragon riding roots, like House Velaryon for example, have similar colouring. And some who definitely do have Targaryen genetics and do ride dragons don't look very Targaryen-y. Jaehaerys and Lucerys Velaryon, for example. The important point here is that through all this time, the only people the Targaryens allowed to try to bond with the dragon were themselves, including, of course, children from marriages to Velaryons or other noble houses. No bastards, no distant relations, no trusted retainers, just Targaryens, until the Dance of the Dragons, where that policy was completely and totally reversed. Prince Jacaerys, on behalf of Team Black, gave open permission to any Dragonseed to come forward to make a claim on any unclaimed dragon. To many, he and his brothers were unspoken living proof that one didn't need Targaryen looks, nor 2 Targaryen parents in order to claim a dragon, nor even technically the surname Targaryen, which may have perhaps emboldened a few people to give it a go. The potential rewards for anyone trying it were huge. Anyone who succeeded in bonding with a dragon would be given land, money, and knighthood, their sons ennobled and their daughters married to nobles. Then there's the prestige and, well, you get a dragon. But there were risks, of course. Obviously, the risks of trying and failing. Dragons can be a bit fiery every now and then, but there are also the risks that you might be putting yourself on the front line of a war that you might lose. The reason why Team Black took this drastic step, breaking centuries of Targaryen tradition, was because at that moment in time, the war didn't seem to be going well for them. They had already lost 2 dragons and 2 dragon riders, Rhaenys on Melies and Lucerys on Arrax. The Greens had control of King's Landing, gained the support of the powerful House Baratheon, had control over the Iron Throne's money, and probably had the larger conventional ground forces, as well as in Vhagar, the largest and fiercest dragon of them all. Yes, Team Black had won a few battles in the Riverlands and gained allies in the north and the Vale of Arryn, but those armies would take some time to get to the war. Team Green were in the ascendancy, which is why Team Black took a risk in what became known as the sowing of the seeds, letting Dragonseeds have a go at bonding with riderless dragons, or more accurately, they let pretty much anyone have a go, because they simply had no way of knowing if someone was or wasn't part Targaryen. Which of course brings us to the big risk for Team Black as a whole. If anyone was allowed to try, how would the Targaryens know whether they would be loyal to their side once they had the dragon? Dragons grant enormous power, and power can change and corrupt people after all. In a civil war, they couldn't even rely on blood ties, that's for sure, which is perhaps why the offer was accompanied by the promise of riches and knighthoods, an attempt to buy loyalty as much as anything else. Regardless of all the risks and potential rewards on both sides, plenty of people did take Jacaerys up on his offer, no doubt dreaming of soaring the skies astride a famous dragon, themselves equally famous and rich, landed and powerful. Many were Dragonseeds, or thought themselves to be, but others seemed to have just taken their shot, knowing full well that they didn't have any blood of the dragon. This open call for dragon riders became known as the sowing of the seeds, or the Red Sowing, because far more lives were claimed than dragons. We're told that in total 48 men and women were burned or maimed, and 16 were killed. The Lord Commander of Queen Rhaenyra's Queensguard, Sir Steffon Darklyn, attempted to mount Sea Smoke, which resulted in Rhaenyra having to choose a new Lord Commander. He was burned to death before he could even get close to the dragon. Lord Gorman Massey tried to approach the old king's dragon Vermithor, but he was also burned to death before he could touch the Bronze Fury. Both House Massey and House Darklyn had long connections to House Targaryen, but no known marriages. It's possible one or both had distant connections through a Targaryen bastard, or perhaps through a marriage to House Velaryon, but it may just be that neither were Dragonseeds. Sea Smoke was eventually claimed by Adam of Hull, a bastard of House Velaryon, later legitimised as Adam Velaryon. A huge, brutal man named Hugh Hammer, the bastard son of a blacksmith, claimed Vermithor, and a pale-haired alcoholic soldier named Ulf the White claimed Silverwing. Some have speculated that dragons who have been ridden before are more amenable to being claimed again, but with new riders for Silverwing, Vermithor and Sea Smoke, only dragons who had never before been ridden remained. A man named Silver Dennis, claiming to be descended from a bastard of Maegor the Cruel, tried to mount the dragon Sheep Stealer, who proceeded to bite off his arm. When his sons rushed forward to help him, the dragon known as the Cannibal appeared to eat them all, whilst Sheepstealer flew off. Sheepstealer accounted for the majority of the 16 deaths during the sowing of the seeds, and showed that he was particularly willing to eat humans as well as sheep. Adam Velarion's younger brother Alin was one of those who tried to claim Sheepstealer, but was also burned for his efforts. But thanks to his brother's intervention with sea smoke, Alin escaped with his life, and went on much later to become the famous Alan Oakenfist and Lord of the Tides. Of course, House Velaryon has the strongest connection to House Targaryen of any other house. Some say the two brothers, Adam and Alin, were bastards of the sea snake, others of his son Laenor. For our purposes, it makes no difference, as there is little doubt that Adam and Alin both had the blood of the dragon. They had the ancestry, and apparently also had the looks. But that does present us with another intriguing twist, because despite apparently identical heritage, one of them succeeded in mounting a dragon, and one of them did not. So it's not just a matter of whether you have the right genetics, it's also to do with the dragon itself. For example, no one tried to claim the ferocious and feral dragon known as the Cannibal during the Red Sowing, because everyone knew how that would end. And it also seems to be about how you approach the dragon. Sheepstealer was eventually claimed by a small brown-skinned girl of 16 named Nettles. Rather than directly approach the dragon, she won his trust gradually, bringing a sheep every morning. The dragon came to recognise her, and no longer had to steal sheep as they were given freely. Soon enough, she made her move, and Sheepstealer was hers thereafter. In this, she may have been doing what Valyrian shepherds thousands of years ago did, claim dragons the old-fashioned way, with sheep and slowly gaining trust instead of sorcery. Valyria didn't begin with 40 elite dragon-riding families. It began more like Nettles. Of course, neither her skin colour nor her success with Sheepstealer are definitive proof of the nature of Dragonseeds or dragons. It's compelling to believe that bringing a sheep every day was the key, and that someone else could have used her method, but there are also rumours that she was Prince Daemon's daughter, so she might have been born with the magical heritage that makes one a Dragonseed. Most likely, there was a bit of both. She went about approaching Sheepstealer in the right way, and had some blood of the dragon in her somewhere along the line. It's as if George R.R. Martin is showing us that in the absence of Valyrian magic, this isn't an exact science. Possessing the blood of the dragon seems to give a significant advantage, but it's not everything. Slowly winning a dragon's trust first seems like a sensible first step, but some people seem to just approach a dragon and jump on board. Dragons with previous riders seem perhaps easier to bond with, but they still burned some people on sight. The sowing of the seeds resulted in 4 new dragon riders, and they in turn went on to have a huge impact on the Dance of the Dragons and beyond. It was a massive gamble by Team Black that sort of paid off. It certainly helped turn the tide of the war for a time, but those concerns about whether you can be sure of someone's loyalty once you give them a dragon remained. The sowing of the seeds may seem like just another twist in the Dance of the Dragons, but it was way more than that. The Targaryens opened up who could ride dragons to all comers, and everything changed. We learned a lot more about how dragon bonding works, but in the longer term, those dragons then went into bloody battle and did not return. The loyalty or lack thereof of the Dragonseeds, or Rhaenyra's paranoia about whether they might be loyal or not, meant that the era of the Dragonseeds lasted less than a year. And those dragons, which could have been ridden by future generations of Targaryens, were not. Imagine if Daeron I had had the chance to try to bond with Vermithor or Daemon Blackfire Sheepstealer. History would have been very, very different, but for the Dragonseeds. If you'd like to see more videos diving deep into George R.R. Martin's world, there's a playlist appearing now on the left of your screen. Or to support this channel, thank you, there's a link to my Patreon page on the right of your screen. That's all for this time. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon.